Who did you pick? If you played Super Smash Bros., did you have like a go-to character?
Mario.
Mario? Yes.
Oh yeah, I loved Mario.
I always thought Link had a better reach because of the sword, just a little bit more of like a wingspan kind of a
hmm
situation. But his double jump always threw me off. I don't know. He does this like little deal where he like spins the sword or whatever. And I don't know. Mario's double jump was always a lot more predictable and
Yeah, well then you could
controllable,
do
I
the
thought.
side cape that could get you back onto the platform if you're falling
Yeah.
off. And Mario had a lot of little things he could do there.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah,
fireballs were cool, of course.
naturally.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Enjoy College on Purpose. This podcast is all about helping people make the most of college. I'm your host. My name is Ish. And one of the things that I get to do is I'm a traveling speaker, spend a lot of time in college campuses and with college students. And there's something I know about college students. You are super busy. And so the entire goal of this podcast is I want to take about 25 minutes, make the most of your time. And in that 25 minutes, I want to interview a really cool professional, someone that I know personally, that I've interacted with, and really believe can bring some value to you. And in that 25 minutes, we'll hang out with this professional. We're going to look back on some of their college memories, but then also ask them some questions to gain some insight so that we can continue to make the most out of life in college today. And so, with that said, my guest today, his name is Chris Lindsey. He's a mental health professional, specifically works in within the educational system. And I'm really excited to just dig into his college days a little bit and glean some insight for our college students. And so, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Ish. Yeah, I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, yeah. One of the first questions that we always ask to our guests is I always like to create just a little bit of a moment for you to brag about yourself. So if you could take a minute, 90 seconds or so, and just tell me a little bit about what you're up to these days. What does professional look like for you? What does personal life look like for you? Just help our audience get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with, I guess, my professional life. I'm a school counselor, a high school counselor specifically at a school in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm also the marketing chair of the Colorado School Counselor Association, so that's a lot of fun too. Yeah, so I just work with high schoolers, and I've got a solid team, student services team that I work with, and we just kind of support high schoolers through their every day to day, whether it's academic stuff, social emotional, or college and career, just lots of different stuff there. Personal life, man, I like to go outside and have fun. With the weather getting a little bit cooler, I haven't been on as many hikes lately, but over the summertime, I love to go on a lot of hikes, and now it's we're getting into wintertime. I'm starting to gear up for ski season, so I'm excited. And obviously, a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, you know, uh, not up to date on all of the shows. I still got to go back and catch up on a couple of the later ones, but can't go wrong with Marvel.
No, it's so true. I mean, Marvel's amazing, but you're right. It's definitely like a lifestyle decision to keep up with
Yeah. There's
everything
so much stuff out there.
that they're putting out. I don't know if you've kept up with this a little bit of news. So, with the writers' strike and the actors' strike, it's just impacted like releases and everything. So it looks like 2024 is going to be one of the like slowest years for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think there's like one movie, maybe two series coming out, and then that's it. You kind of have to wait until 2025, which on the one hand for me, I'm kind of mad about it, but then I'm like, there's some of us that we need an extra year to catch up. We're kind of behind on a bunch of stuff with all the content that they pumped out over the
Oh,
last three
oh
or four
yeah.
years. Chris, another question we like to ask our guests is, if you could just take a minute or so and help paint a picture for us of what your college journey looked like. Were you an on-campus student, off-campus student? Were you mainly focused on academics, or were you also like working on the side as well?
Yeah, I went to Colorado State University, and my undergrad was actually in journalism and tech communications. And I had a minor in business, and so I loved a lot of the kind of marketing realm there. So, I guess trying to think of, academic versus personal life. I took my academics seriously. My friends now tell me, oh yeah, I skip classes all the time. And I'm like, I don't think I ever skipped a class in college. Like, I'm sorry, that just wasn't me. But then I did have, oh gosh, I honestly probably had 2 to 3 jobs going at a time throughout college. I worked at a pizza shop freshman through senior year. And then gosh, I don't even know how many other jobs I had in addition to that going on at different times. And so, I think a lot of it was just trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do with a
Mm.
journalism degree. And so trying different jobs, kind of bouncing from different things, just trying to explore and figure out what I wanted to do. And then in that, I just had like a solid, tight-knit group of friends that we kind of did everything together. My freshman year I unfortunately had kind of a rough roommate situation and just I didn't have a great freshman year, and then really started to make some solid friends kind of sophomore, junior, senior year, and we just kind of hung out and I don't know, we did a lot of different things together. So yeah.
No, and gosh, I so appreciate you speaking into all those things because it's not hard to look at the college experience and just focus on, hey, I'm here to skill up. I'm here to get what I need to do so that I can progress with my professional life. And yet at the same time, that whole college experience is so complicated and
Hmm.
nuanced and so gritty. I mean, even down to the point of like, you'd be surprised how a complicated roommate situation bleeds into
Oh yeah.
everything else, or trying to manage the tension of, hey, I've got a 5 hour shift later tonight on Friday night, and a project is due on Monday, and trying to like balance all of that stuff. And it's like the non-glorious portion of the college experience. And yet even so, you're still like, man, got to keep my head above water and
Yeah.
keep moving it forward.
Oh yeah, I mean there's a lot of you see the movies of the college life and you're just out there living it up and yeah, I mean there is a lot of that, but there's also a lot of yeah, you're up till 2 a.m. just busting out homework because you didn't get off work until 10 o'clock at night and it's a busy time, so it can be tough. And then after I graduated, I got my bachelor's. I worked for a few years and did marketing, sales, kind of some things like that. And then I just found it wasn't for me and jumped into grad school and got my master's for school counseling.
Yeah, man. Oh, that's so fascinating. Chris, I want to dive a little bit more into your college experience. And a fun question we always like to ask here on the podcast is, when you think back through your college experience, either undergrad or graduate school, is there one or two memories that just stand out as like, man, these were the two coolest things that I ever got to participate in while I was in school?
I think in undergrad, now this isn't necessarily a specific memory, but memories of specific activity was honestly playing video games with my roommates.
Yeah, yeah.
Man, it was just, I felt like a lot of time, at least in like my social life, as I was always trying to be someone I wasn't and trying to, do things that I didn't enjoy just for the sake of I, having that stereotypical experience and it
Mm,
wasn't for me. So really, I think the funnest times that I had were when I was just playing video games with my roommates. Man, I wasn't
yeah.
trying to be anybody. We weren't trying to do anything. We were just sitting down playing Super Smash Brothers for like 5 hours straight, and we just connected over it. And
Mm.
it was, man, it was so much fun. I always lost at every time.
Wait, who did you pick? If you played Super Smash Bros., did you have like a go-to character?
Mario.
Mario, yes.
Oh yeah, I loved Mario.
I always thought Link had a better reach because of the sword, just a little bit more of like a wingspan kind of a
Hmm.
situation. But his double jump always threw me off. I don't know. He does this like little deal where he like spins the sword or whatever. And I don't know. Mario's double jump was always a lot more predictable and
Yeah, well then you could
controllable,
do
I
the
thought.
side cape that could get you back onto the platform if you're falling
Yeah.
off. And Mario had a lot of little things he could do there.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah,
fireballs were cool, of course.
naturally.
Dude, so video games, and, I really appreciate that you're bringing this up. So I know I just put out an article a few weeks ago on how valuable video games can be throughout the college experience for different types of personalities and different people. We're not all wired the same way.
Mhm.
And not only like is it helpful on like a social level, it helps you make connections and interact with other people and build some of these bonds that other people are building by going out on Friday nights or by being a part of a sports team or however else they're building bonds. But then the other thing that was always so fascinating, it's almost just this idea of like the problem solving that goes into accomplishing whatever video game objective is in front of you. Someone you're trying to
Mhm.
defeat, a stage you're trying to get past. Even in Super Smash Brothers, when you're playing with your friends, you've got a handful of friends who you've got to study them, learn their techniques, what they're into, and even though you lose all the time, you're still kind of progressing, and you're like, okay, I kind of know what his go-to thing is,
Mhm.
and it's doing stuff like neurologically that comes back and it's helpful in a classroom setting and so on and so forth as a professional as well. So for me, video games were super critical throughout the college experience as well. I'm really curious where your head goes just kind of as you hear that.
Yeah, that actually brings me to a couple different thoughts. So I mean, yes, I agree. I think video games can be incredibly important because they do. I mean, they can work towards that reaction time. If you got to be quicker to figure something out, if you're playing games where you've got to put puzzles together, and it doesn't have to be your stereotypical puzzle of moving this here, but even just getting through a level of, okay, well, I've got to, do this with this character and maybe send this, depending on the game, send this person over there, whatever you have to do, but you've got to use a lot of those critical thinking skills to
Mm,
get through a game. And I mean, that goes for not every game out there, but a lot of games out there can be really helpful for that. And there's some games that are, if you kind of fall into, I don't know, certain games that maybe don't use a lot of those critical thinking skills, they can even be really isolating. But if you're doing kind of those games that are going to make you think and are really you're playing with your friends especially, that's not going to be that isolating game. That can bring people together. One other thing that made me think of when you're talking about, oh yeah, maybe you lost all the time, but you're still progressing. So two of my roommates were actually like not professional. Well, I don't know if I'd call them professional competitors, but I mean they would go participate in like national championships and stuff
wow.
with Super Smash Brothers, and so obviously I was always going to lose because they were so good. But then I'd go and play with a different group of friends, and I'm like, oh, I'm terrible. I don't know what I'm doing with Smash, and I would do really well, and I would usually win, and I'm like, oh man, what the heck? Am I actually good at this? And so I mean that just went to show like I played people who were of like a whole different caliber of in that game, and that brought, even though I kept losing to them, that still brought me to a higher level and to be really good. And I don't think that's just for video games. I think that goes for just about everything is, nothing's wrong with surrounding yourself with people that are better than you at things because then you're going to
Mm,
learn from
mhm,
them.
mhm.
You're going to pick up their tactics, what they do. And then if you use that, go into a different setting or use that for your own personal growth, like, whew, man, that can go a long way.
Yeah, dude. I absolutely love that this interaction with a mental health professional veered into the value of video games. And another question we like to ask to our guests is, obviously where you're at in life now, a lot of experience, couple degrees, couple different career paths that you're into. Is there something you know today that you wish you would have known when you were 18? That would have been really helpful for 18-year-old Chris as he's getting started
Mm.
with life after high school.
I think the biggest thing that I can think of is that, I wish 18-year-old Chris would have known to just be himself and don't be scared of being himself. When I first started college, I was immediately scared that first thing I was immediately scared I wasn't smart enough. So I actually, I had switched my degree because I thought journalism would be easier. I originally wanted to be a marine biologist. And so then I was like, nah, that's too hard. I think journalism's easier. And then I went through a lot of college kind of living in that fear of not being accepted by people, um, wanting to do, as I mentioned before, wanting to do all those kind of stereotypical college experience things, and that just wasn't me. So I wish I would have known, like, man, Chris, just be yourself, and that's okay. When I started in grad school, I think I'd kind of finally gotten to a point where I was pretty confident just being myself and being just unapologetically me. And I I made so many new friends in grad school, and I didn't, I kind of put myself out there to try a couple new things, to go out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, yeah, I was just being me, and I was just surrounding myself with people who were like that. Versus in undergrad when I was really trying to get through and I was just trying to be someone that wasn't me, and it made it so much more challenging than it needed to be.
Mm. Dude, that's so good. That's so good because, my mind's immediately going to, at the time of this podcast, we're hitting the end of the fall semester, and my mind's immediately going to, freshmen or people in their first year in college, their first semester in college, who probably have spent the last several months not giving themselves permission to be themselves.
Hmm.
And whatever outcome or result that has yielded, there's a tension, there's a struggle there of like, do I keep this going? This is probably exhausting. It's at least for me, what I know about not being your whole self, about not protecting that integrity of being who you are everywhere that you go. It's demanding. It's
Hmm.
demanding to a point where it's detrimental. And so I absolutely love, this idea you're putting out there, giving people permission to be themselves. That's so insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
The other question that I wanted to ask, I'm going to tap a little bit more into what you do professionally now. Obviously, you work with high school students as they're gearing up for life after high school. And so, in all of that work that you've done with high school students, is there maybe a trend or a specific quality or something that stands out in your work with these students that helps to isolate or recognize, hey, this kid's going to do some pretty cool stuff after high school because they have this, or here's this trend that we're noticing.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is resiliency, and I think you can throw that out there, and as a concept it's easy to say, but then when you really kind of get down to defining it, it can be a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, it's seeing people who are willing to take on a challenge. And I'm not saying to go and, take on the world and do anything crazy, but, sometimes just students who are willing to take on that extra challenge know that it's not going to be easy, but they want to do it anyways because they know it could be good for them. And do see a lot of students who are not willing to take on those challenges. And I mean, honestly, I understand why it's hard. Like a challenge is hard. Of course, you don't want to take it on necessarily. But when we take on more challenges, the next challenge is a little bit easier. And so I think when I see students who are willing to take on just little challenges here and there, and then as they go from freshman year, maybe their challenge is just like talking to someone at the lunch table, versus senior year, maybe their challenge is, oh, okay, I'm gonna go to the national FCCLA conference and present in front of 100 people. Like, I mean, that's a huge change from freshman to senior year, but they get there by taking on more and more challenges. And so by the time they get to college, okay, they've got their next big challenge and it's scary, but they're willing to do it. And this is maybe getting off to a little bit of side comment here, but one thing that one of my friends told me a few years ago that's always stuck with me, and I still say it to myself, is every time I get to a new challenge, he would say to himself, and now I say it to myself too, because it's just I always think of it as like you get to a next new challenge, and I'm thinking, all right, I don't know if I can take this on, but you know what? I got my driver's license. I can do this. Because when I was 16 years old, that was the hardest thing I ever did. Are you kidding me? I'm sitting there in the car, I'm getting ready to drive. Someone's got their clipboard judging everything I'm doing. I was terrified.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And now every time I get into a car, doesn't matter who's with me or what it looks like, no problem. I can jump in and do it. And so as at the time that was brutal. But now as I've progressed and taken on challenges throughout the years, those things seem a lot smaller. So there's my
Dude,
rant I mean, take on a challenge here and there.
I love that so much. I remember for me, it was winter break when I was in fifth grade. I was like caught up in this little situation at school where, this was like back in the day where you had to, you would get a conduct folder and you had to take it home and mom and dad would sign however
Yep.
many demerits you had for the week. And I had been on a roll of like not bringing my conduct folder home for like 2 months. And so what was brewing was like, I know a parent teacher conference is coming up, but I found myself where like they still hadn't called the parent teacher conference yet at the end of the fall semester. So then we went into like the 2 week Christmas break, which was like the worst 2 weeks of my life. That entire 2 weeks. I mean, like from the first day that we were off all the way through opening Christmas or gifts on Christmas morning, driving back from seeing relatives, like that entire time, I just remember feeling like the stress of like the hammer's coming down and my parents are going to find out that
Yep.
I haven't brought home my conduct folder for like 2 months. Anyways, so that moment, like I do the same thing you do, where like when I feel stressed these days, I'm like, it's not worse than fifth grade, man.
Yeah.
It's nuts, but it's such a like a cornerstone for me of like, regardless of how crazy or stressful life gets, I'm like, fifth grade ish got through it, man. We can do this. So I don't know, man.
Absolutely.
That's where my head went when you shared that. So, Chris, dude, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really, really appreciate your insight and some of the different topics that we got to touch into. Very, very, very well done today, man. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you putting this on, and I think this is something really important for college students to hear. So I think this is awesome what you're doing here.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, man. And to our listeners, hey, thanks for jumping on to today's episode of Enjoy College on Purpose. I do have one big request before you turn this off and put your phone away. Would you please leave a rating and a comment there on the platform that you're listening to this episode on? This is actually very, very helpful for us as we spread the word and overcome the algorithms to try and help as many people as possible. And so thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.